Welcome to Realizing Resilience, a podcast from the Connecticut Women's Consortium. We're not behavioral health professionals, but we're your gateway to real conversations with the experts. Each episode, we'll delve into the vast landscape of mental health, from personal stories to expert insights. Together, we'll bridge the gap between clinical expertise and personal experiences, connecting with diverse voices and perspectives. Join us for insightful conversations that demystify the world of mental health.
Gina Ferrara is a master of Reiki and sound and vibration and an auricular acupuncture specialist. She supports others with simple tools towards empowerment and overall wellness. Through her business, Odonata Reiki Healing Arts, Gina offers courses, workshops, and presentations for personal development and inner self-care. Gina also provides healing sessions for individuals, couples, and groups. She is currently a teacher on the meditation app Insight Timer.
Welcome back to Realizing Resilience. I'm your host, Marisa.
My name is Alana.
And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Gina Ferrara. Gina, how are you today?
I am doing really well. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Good. We're happy to have you. I want to start off our conversation by asking if you can break down what integrative healing means and what type of practices it includes.
Boy. Yeah, it's a good one. So, I think of it as we say integrative healing. That's the word I like to use, but you can also use the words alternative or complementary. You hear these kind of used interchangeably. And I think for me, it is really just about practices that we can bring in that are unifying, that we can combine with other things to help create our own wellness. I mean, if we want a working definition, it's any practice that is outside of our conventional, mainstream, traditional medicine, things that are for our current culture, anything that's kind of outside of that is what I see as alternative. Now, there's probably a list that is so much bigger than I could even understand that people are utilizing that we would consider integrative or alternative. I personally have been looking at it in terms of practices that have come from like Eastern cultures, things probably mostly from Asia, because those are the things that have been seem to be most prominent here in our country anyway. The stuff that is also getting looked at, getting researched, getting talked about. So some of those things would be probably things involving energy medicine, Chinese medicine, acupuncture, qigong, tai chi, meditation, mindfulness. Of course, I'm Reiki, so I would say anything that's energy work, Reiki, sound healing. Well, actually, it's all energy work. But yoga, that's a very popular practice. So those are things that I see as a part of integrative, alternative, or complementary practices. In the workshop, of course, though, we talk about so many because it's not an exhaustive list, but it's large. So yeah, that's how I see it. Anything that kind of brings additional supports to people's health, wellness, empowerment, physical, mental, emotional, and possibly spiritual. That fun word.
I think that's a great definition because it is so broad, but that is truly kind of, I think, the common thread between most things we think of as like alternative practices.
It can be complicated to explain, and I think about it because of my own family. I come from a very professional kind of medical model family, which many of us do. My mother was a registered nurse involved in the medical field for her whole life, pretty much. And, trying to talk about it can be difficult. So it's hard to put it into good words, I think. And that's why it's nice to be able to experience, but also be a living example of what it is. And that's why it's kind of nice to present this workshop, because it gives so much time for us to really explore, talk about things, so that it isn't just this one little bite that we're hearing or reading about and not quite understanding.
So speaking a little bit to your personal journey, and that's really interesting considering how you were raised, how did you start kind of integrating this work into both your personal and professional life?
Well, actually, I mean, I could go into a whole lot about how I was raised and how this journey kind of came to me, but I won't do that specifically. But I will share that, as a kid, I was not at all connected to myself. You hear a lot of stories about people that have instant connections when they're young to energy work, but I did not. I didn't understand myself. I had no connection to myself. I was very empathic and I had no boundaries. I wasn't kind of able to create the boundaries between your emotions and mine, and really had a hard time with that. So lived my life mostly as I was growing up, just kind of managing other people's stuff. So of course, when it came to go to college, I was a dancer, and that's really all I knew how to do, is how I felt. So I wanted to dance, but my mother goes, "Well, you can't dance. You can't do that. You have to go to college and all of this." So she found, and she knew I really liked helping people. That was really all I wanted to do, was kind of help people too. So she found this thing that was a fairly new career, really, in the 70s. It was called dance therapy. It kind of started in the 50s, so it was still evolving. Well, it's still evolving now, but and so I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. I can dance, but I can look like I'm also going to do something good. But of course, I got involved in dance therapy and I really liked it, and it felt really genuine to me, and it was really helpful for me to move on professionally. So I did that, and here I was. I mean, I was also dancing. I did my own dancing, but I was also using it in my work. And you'd think being connected physically in that way, it would have helped me, and it probably did in many ways. But I was always seeking, always striving for something else. Difficulty finding it. I've practiced yoga most of my life, but I really didn't go fully into yoga. I was more into asana yoga. I didn't look at the whole practice, but it still helped me. It was still wonderful. I looked into meditation. I didn't even understand what that was, so that didn't help. And I really just went through life like this. I think I was happy enough, but certainly not settled enough. And I was working at Connecticut Valley Hospital here in our state. And there were a group of people that were connected to some practices that they really felt had enriched their lives, and wanted to bring it to the treatment programs at the hospital. So they, with the support of the hospital, God bless them there, they were able to start a committee and a whole really movement toward bringing these practices in to staff members and then ultimately to our clients. So, of course, being the dance therapist, I got on board there thinking, well, I'm already doing this. And that's what introduced me to some of these practices. Now, listen, this is not that long ago. I mean, I'm 65. It was probably when I was 50. And so I started taking these sessions that were being offered. There were some free sessions offered. There were some things we were able to take advantage of that I paid for, but were still easy to access. I took Reiki, didn't really care for it. I studied vibrational sounds, and that went, oh, there's something there. I loved it. And so I was very invested in that. Then I moved on to taking a mindfulness-based stress reduction course, and all of a sudden, meditation started to make sense. Now, that's a long evolution, of course, and then over time, I continued my work with Reiki. I was encouraged by a friend. I wasn't really that interested, but I went and pursued more training in Reiki, and suddenly everything just clicked. And I was using all of these practices with my clients. I was trying to bring it in with them in the things I was already doing in group sessions and individual sessions. But it really wasn't until it became a part of my life when I realized I'm using these and I'm suddenly feeling pretty balanced. And I started making it more routine for me personally, and using it with the people around me, my friends, my family, my animals. And suddenly my life shifted completely. And so then it became this really beautiful merging of my work and my personal connection. So that what I did at work ultimately, I still did movement, but I was really much more connected to all of these other practices. Well, and I speak about Reiki, sound. I do the auricular acupuncture and meditation. So all of those things I was able to bring, I think, more effectively to my clients at that point, and also feel like I was the living example of what I was trying to offer our clients. So, and I no longer work there. I left there last year. So this is my full-time gig, and it feels great. Yeah. So I think I finally, and of course, listen, I'm changing all the time. I'm continuing to evolve. It's so cool to say, oh gosh, look where I was last year, and know that in another year I'll say the same thing. That's very exciting. And I'm sure all healing practice can be like that. But there is something about these energy-based healing practices that really are guiding me and encouraging me and exciting me to learn, to grow, and to be better.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these type of practices, Reiki, sound healing, things like that, you really have to, it's not a job that you show up, do what you have to do, and then go home and you don't think about that anymore. It's not, you work in finance, you balance your spreadsheets, you go home, you watch the news. Like you
Yeah.
kind of have to be about it in every aspect of your life.
I think, Marissa, that's just so true. And that's the nature of these processes because, in the Eastern culture, things are not separate. It isn't that, you just focus on this one thing for your healing. Everything is holistic. And so, it does make sense that that's how it would be when you're working with these energy systems. Yeah, I like that. It's this, we're in a culture and a society where we box everything. Things get very compartmentalized. In some ways, that's good. It's not like it's all terrible, but it also just creates a really easy way to disconnect, you know. And so I'll tell you that I teach Reiki classes, certification classes, and I see it frequently. And it saddens me in a way because I want everybody to know what they can experience and what they can have. But many times people are just coming because they're curious. And because the work really begins when the classes are over, it's hard for people to maintain that. It really has to be something that you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think thinking about how we kind of box everything up in society, I think that is kind of how I was thinking about your mother being, you said she was an RN.
She was, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think in the medical field too, everything is like there's a label for everything. There's a symptom, there's a this, there's a that, there's a treatment, and we move to the next phase. And so having kind of that upbringing in how society also sees healing that way too, how do you kind of integrate that thought process of the scientific research, there's that, with the more self-care, spiritual, intuitive aspect? I really liked how you said about practices that are unifying. How do you
Yeah.
kind of bridge that gap together?
Very carefully. It's a very juicy question, and I am very cautious when I approach discussing this, depending on who the person is and what their backgrounds are, what their interest is, because I feel that, you know, it can be a little bit off-putting and when we don't understand it completely. And I also realize that everybody is approaching everything from their own lens. So, there are some people that are connected to what we would call spirit or their spirituality or to some higher force. And there are some people that do not understand that or don't agree with that and have their own feelings about it. And maybe it's a scientific understanding of energy. And I see them both as valid. And I want to make sure I respect that because as we know from quantum, physics, it's that everything is energy, right? We've learned that now that everything's made up of energy. and that everything is moving, everything is vibrating. So to me, scientifically, I think it makes complete sense, all of these things. And I also think from a spiritual realm, it makes sense. So when I look at it, I see it perfect for everybody, but not everybody's open to that interpretation, of course. And again, like I mentioned before, things coming from this Eastern philosophy where there is no separation. There is just one. It's not that, you're not going to focus on your spirit side or your emotional side. No, you're going to focus on your whole being. It's difficult to parse that out and to kind of make that separation. I do think that we have been doing that here. I don't know successfully or not successfully, but I think there are many ways that we take bits and pieces from things and have been able to integrate. And I think that's great because we need to do whatever we can to guide our process, right? To guide our wellness. I think about yoga, especially because I was very involved with yoga, and not as, not fully. But I think people, if you ask anybody, because yoga's everywhere, right? You can take a yoga class anywhere. And it's one part of yoga. It's the asana yoga. But it's still working for folks, even though we're not incorporating the whole yogic philosophy, perhaps. You're taking 2 classes a week or whatever you're doing, or you're practicing for 15 minutes every day. But somehow it's still serving needs, I think, because it is still bringing in connection to the body and connection to the mind, as well as a meditation. So I think fortunately, we've been able to kind of take some of these pieces and, put them together and make it work. Now, that being said, the beautiful thing, there's, of course, we're an evidence-based society. Everybody wants, the science to give us proof. This is about insurance. This is about where we are right now. That's just how we're living. So the only good thing, one of the good things, I have to watch my bias, right? One of the good things about that is that, okay, we suddenly have all of this research that says, yeah, stress is huge. Stress affects mind, body, spirit, everything. So we know that decreasing stress levels, increasing self-care is going to ease and take care of everything in the big picture, right? It'll work with the medication, it'll work with the therapies, it'll work with the treatments. So how do we find what those self-care practices are? What are we going to use to reduce the stress? And that's where we have this plethora of amazing things to choose from. And because we're so individual, I think it's nice that we have the options to choose what works for us. So if you don't want to go with something that is so spirit-based, you can find something that is not, that will still be guiding and helpful. So that's what I think is really wonderful. And now we're doing, of course, more research on the 2 things combined. It's not always clear. It's not as predominant, but I think it's happening. So I think those 2 things work really well together. That's an intense question, But I think we make it work, and I think it's going to continue to work because more and more, I've had people referred to me to help heal with surgeries. And we see now Reiki practitioners, sound healers involved in the hospital settings. We see that Copper Beach is all over everywhere, offering their programs for meditation and mindfulness. So things are slowly, I think, becoming solidified. I think ultimately, if we come back in another 50 or 100 years, I think we're going to be amazed. Maybe we'll still be here, who knows? It'll be amazing how the changes will occur. I kind of think, we're in a big cycle, we're in a big circle. And we're just at one point, the point is always going to be moving. So we're at a certain point and it's going to come around again, I hope. We'll see.
I think that's such a wonderful way of looking at it. And it's so true because it's obviously there's a link. Like there's so many of our practitioners are interested in integrative health regardless of whether or not they practice it. I think even if the benefits aren't illustrated by the current research and science that we have, it fully, there's obviously some sort of beneficial connection that people are experiencing. And I love you talking about it where it's not, you're not really being forced to do anything. I think that's one of the things that makes people a little bit hesitant, is that they think they're going to have to be in this experience they don't fully understand, or they're not ready to understand. And there's so many ways to engage with it. Like, it doesn't have to be this full spiritual experience. You don't immediately have to be grounded or understanding of yourself to get it or to feel it. And I think that's really exciting.
And that's such a good point, really, Alana, because I do think that there's so much choice in everything. And that's one of the things, we have options in our lives. We have options for everything. And I look at meditation because for me, meditation is the thing that encompasses everything. I feel that's how I am in my life and in my practice, that it's all meditation and we're just using these other things to help us get there. But meditation is one word. There's so much that you can do to help you to get to that place that we call meditating. So it doesn't have to be that person, sitting on the rock by the stream. Meditation is so many things and still provides the same benefits. So yeah, it's true. That's why I love, I work on Insight Timer, which is the meditation app. And I just find, and I know there are other ones out there, I just don't know that much about them, but I look at something like that and I'm so impressed and so amazed by it because it provides instant opportunity for people to learn, instant opportunity for people just to take in a moment of experience. And actually, with you really lose nothing. It's free, and you you take what you want. You're kind of anonymous. So I think that there's so much out there right now that offers folks that opportunity to see, all the options. I love it. It's very exciting.
Yeah, the accessibility is great. I was a person who, when my first therapist suggested meditating, I was like, that's woo-woo stuff. That's not going to work for me. Because I didn't get it. And then once I tried it, I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was, and it can be what I need it to be. But also, I remember he burned me CDs, and this was like not even that long ago. It was maybe 10 years ago. But the accessibility has gotten so much better in that, like, you can do a meditation on Instagram. So that's very exciting too.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And it's wonderful. And I love when I walk like Elizabeth Park or it here in Hartford, but also my parents used to live in Orlando, and they had a huge, beautiful parks there where there was always somebody doing qigong or meditation practices, yoga. I know we have it here in Hartford as well on the river. So I love that you can really go just be doing one of your activities, bringing your kids somewhere and be suddenly exposed to something. So it's so true. The accessibility is wonderful.
So you mentioned a little bit about the workshop you'll be leading, which is Exploring Alternative Practices and Experiential Workshop, and that will be on March 25th. Can you just go into a little bit about which practices will be covered, and then also how those practices can be applied for clinicians, both for themselves and then also with their clients?
Sure. So, in that workshop, we cover over, I think it's like 11 different practices, talking about them in a little bit of depth. Meditation, mindfulness, Reiki, sound healing, creative arts, process, Ayurveda, all the Chinese medicine, not all of them, but many of the Chinese medicine practices, including acupuncture, Tai Chi, Qigong, EFT, breath work. We also touch on a few others, but we don't talk about them in depth. And it's an experiential workshop. I like to think of it as an educational workshop, but also a time for self-care for the person that's participating. So because I have certain things that I practice myself, I use in my own business, I am bringing those to the workshop as well. So we will talk and discuss certain things, but we'll also have 4 like little breakout experiential sessions. One will be Reiki and sound together. And these are all group experiences that we do together. Another will be some yoga. We actually just do some chair yoga practice. Dance and movement we do, which I know is always a little scary for everybody, but it's really a nice grounding. It's usually a fun process. And then some guided meditation. So it's kind of an experience sprinkled in with the discussion. And I like to have folks share their understanding of how they might be able to bring practices into their workplace. But I always come about it from my own experience and how I was able to do it and how it worked for me. I really liked I guess my focus, of course, would be for people to take care of themselves first. I like to offer the fact that if you are just using a practice for yourself, that is having an impact on your work. I think no matter what you do, so I know I've taught Reiki classes at Connecticut Valley, and the idea is that they will bring the employees will bring this right back to their clients and use it, which would be great and is wonderful. But if you're practicing Reiki with yourself, if you're using the philosophy of Reiki, you are going to be so different and so changed that the person you are in your treatment of your clients or working with your clients or your colleagues is already going to have an impact. So I really try to make sure people understand that first, that it is important to take it in for yourself. And then we work on the ways that you can incorporate it. Personally, I used to bring my bowls to meetings at work with my colleagues. If I was leading a meeting, especially, I would start with meditation, try to finish with it. Sometimes you get the eye rolls, but you know what? Everybody benefited from it in the end. Everybody always enjoyed that. I also like to try to figure out ways that people can bring it into the work that they're actually doing. So if they're working one-to-one with clients, how maybe one of these practices can fit in for them. And sometimes it's about what the client needs and the client wants. And the other times it's something that they may feel is appropriate for their process. The other opportunity is to just offer it in a group setting, which I really like that idea because it means, and I think that's what happened to me during the pandemic. We were stuck on our units at the hospital. You couldn't really leave. And so everybody was experiencing everything. You had clients, you had staff, you had the janitorial staff. I mean, everybody was experiencing this. And so here's that unifying piece again. We were all having this similar experience. Hey, not everybody was sitting down and saying, this is great, but it didn't matter because people were having the opportunity to go through it. It was a bonding thing for colleagues. It was a bonding thing for colleagues and clients. And it was something that people would come up to me later and say, how do I do more of that? So there's so many little ways that we can incorporate it into the work setting that isn't even formal. And I think that's some of the things I hope that we can talk about during this workshop. I hope that made sense. Sometimes I feel like I just keep talking and I'm like, is there a point there? I'm not sure.
I think that made great sense. And it was a really good summary of what a participant can expect when coming and just what mindset they should be in as well when they walk into the training. They should be willing to accept or not accept or whatever. So I think
Yeah.
that was a great description.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. In being so involved in this kind of work and having it be so many different parts of your life, is there any advice that you would give to someone who is skeptical about integrative healing but curious to try it for the first time?
We are all connected in some way internally. And I think I would always say to somebody, all the time we're using our breath, so you are already connected to something that can offer you a benefit. So even if these practices seem a little unwieldy, a little overwhelming, a little like they maybe you don't belong around them, remember that's the first place that we can come to is our breath. We always have it. So I think we don't even think about it. Somebody says, okay, hey, listen, take a breath. It's something so ingrained in who we are that we take a breath, we take a pause. And that's just kind of the little bit of a kernel. That's the core of a lot of these practices that we're incorporating. I also think I would encourage people to take advantage of something like Insight Timer, like YouTube, Instagram, places where these practices are explained. You can kind of like a fly on the wall, kind of see what they are and get a greater understanding of them. It's also nice to do things in a group. Sometimes it's daunting to be one-on-one and feel put on the spot, but so many of these things can be appreciated in a group setting. And there's something magical about a group anyway, because not only are you dealing with the practice itself, the energy that may be coming from that practice, but the energy, the excitement, the personality of all the people that are there as well. So that's always a nice thing, to suggest that folks try things in a group, maybe with a friend who's already been there or has some experience with it. And the other thing I guess I would say is, sometimes it's nice if you know somebody that's involved in alternative practices, integrative practices, and you like what you see. There's something about what they're giving off that seems, it's a draw for you. You might want to just have a conversation and just see if you can find out more about that and see what they can provide for their understanding of it. Yeah, it's a lot. I understand that some things can be hard to hear, hard to see, hard to understand, and hard to accept. And we're all in that in some way. I don't make me sing by myself, but I'll sing in a group. So yeah, those would be some suggestions.
I think that's a beautiful way to end it. Thank you so much for joining us today and for talking with us. I think this is going to be a really awesome training, and I anticipate a lot of people are going to be excited to just kind of try.
Good. I hope so. I love it, and I'm really looking forward to it myself. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really wonderful. I love to talk about my work. I love to talk and have to really consider how to share what I do and why I think it's important. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing with us. Links will be in the description to learn more about Gina and sign up for Exploring Alternative Practices, an Experiential Workshop on March 25th. Check out our links below to keep up with us at the Connecticut Women's Consortium. Thank you for tuning in today, and I'll see you next time.